There's some expiration dates looming, with a whole bunch of things scheduled to be removed entirely from the game in January 2023, unless Games Workshop decide to do something about it. Let's talk about the armies that are going to be hit by the loss of rules. Hello and welcome back to Auspex Tactics, where today we're talking about the army rules that are apparently going away in January, at least according to a Games Workshop document of legal rules for match play things in 40k. Let's talk through their document, and then each of the 40k armies that look like they're going to get hit by this, and what the effects might be. So this list is something that we've talked about on the channel a good few months back now. It's a formal list of what valid supplements you can use in Warhammer 40k. And I think that the original reason that they came out for it was to basically stop Tyranids getting excess amounts of power by getting Leviathan and the Crusher Stampede supplements on top of their already strong rules. Not that that stopped them from absolutely demolishing the entire meta of 40k for quite a long time anyway. The list mainly includes the Codex supplements and Armies of Renown, things like Orks Blood Axes, or the Admech Expiry Veteran cohort, but there's also some fairly core rules for the game here as well, things like the Inquisition rules, the ones for rogue traders, and generic fortifications that any army can pick. As well as just telling you which ones were legal, they also included a bunch of expected expiry dates for these supplements, and a whole bunch of those are January 2023, basically telling people that you can't expect those supplement rules to be in use after then. I kind of feel that these might be partly due to the books having gone out of print. The way Games Workshop did their campaigns in 9th edition was they had a Warzone, Octarius and Charadon. Those books were little campaign stories for 40k and also had some formations and supplements for some armies in them. A fair few people didn't like them that much because it was a very expensive book for just a few pages of rules if you weren't that bothered about the narrative stuff and pretty pictures. The Charadon and Octarius stuff has all gone out of print. I believe that the Nachmund Warzone books are still on sale on Games Workshop's website, and the Nephilim ones I think were probably planned but never made due to backlash against them, and the supplemental rules for the Necrons were farmed out into White Dwarf, which was kind of interesting, and probably a better way to deliver it as well, seeing as that's a lot cheaper to get your hands on a couple of pages. Still though, quite a lot of these are very useful things to their army, or just add a whole bunch of depth and flavour to the game. And the subheading under each of the sections says you can expect these to expire in January 2023 unless they're superseded by a codex, as a bunch of stuff has been. Say for example the Cadian supplement for Guard that no longer really has Cadians as they were, or Bellacor's Army of Renown that was superseded by the Demons Codex. Some of these extra rules really are quite important to their armies, and it is a bit of a shame for them. It seems kind of weird to bin them off when we know 10th edition is going to be happening sometime in 2023. I just wonder why they don't just wait until that happens. Obviously, perhaps the least exciting outcome of this is they might just issue an updated document and say that yes, these ones are still good to go until the end of 9th. But I feel that even if they did that, there's likely to be some rules lost at least, as we'll go over on in a second. I also feel that if that was actually what they were going to do, they probably just would have written the June 2023 expiry date on all of them, rather than having some for January and some for June. Given they have differentiated between the two for a bunch of armies, it does seem that there's at least a reasonable possibility that a bunch of these rules are just going to go away and never come back. In any case, let's go through these potential losses one by one. First up we have the Sisters, and the thing that they'd be losing is the Our Martyred Lady supplement. This one's one of their ones where they expand upon a sub-faction and give them a bunch of stratagems and relics and things. I feel like this might be perhaps one of the least exciting ones that they released out of any of them. The stratagems were kind of okay. Maybe the most interesting thing was that you could make a very fighty canoness that put out a whole bunch of mortal wounds. I feel like this one was a bit more of a fun and fluffy one. I feel like a lot of the rules of this one just focused around them sacrificing themselves for the Emperor in various different ways. Perhaps not enormously relevant to the Sisters' top army lists, almost all of those run Bloody Rose for the awesome melee, but certainly losing the rules won't help our Martyred Ladies players. The Bloody Rose supplement came out in Warzone Nachmund, so that one's still apparently good to go for June, and that one is very relevant to competitive lists as it adds them a bunch of more options, on top of the sub-faction that I would have argued had the best rules already. Next up, and if these do genuinely go away, then I feel like Orks might be some of the biggest losers. They would lose their Speed Mob and Blood Axe supplement, both of which I think are really quite nice ones. Speed Mob is their Army of Renown that basically makes you build around the speed freaks like the buggies and the bikes, and a few other supporting things like planes and wagons, and I feel like this does a good job as an Army of Renown, as it actually makes that build kind of playable, without just being the OP must-take option. The vast majority of Orks lists build around some standard Goths lists, but some people do seem to be succeeding to make this work in tournaments every so often. The army is quite powerful, it basically amps up the speed of everything that's in the army and gives them some invul saves for a bit more durability, plus a bit more damage from a warlord trait. It makes the Death Copters very nice as well, jumping on and off the board with attacking out of the sun. It's got some big weaknesses though, like struggling on objectives and secondaries. I feel like this one might be a bit of a sad loss for people who have built their army around that sort of formation. The Blood Axe one, I think, would also be a bit rubbish to have it go away. The clan trait isn't particularly powerful, though they have a few interesting options, and the supplement basically gave you a bunch of stratagem support for things like commandos and storm boys, plus a few fun relics and things like an Orky sniper. Out of that one, I think perhaps my favourite thing is the surprise stratagem for commandos getting the jump on a charging foe. That one just feels very orky and just a bit silly, but is also genuinely quite powerful in game. Again, with Orc Goths basically being the way to go, I think anything to encourage other clans is quite nice, so it's quite nice to have these extra options in a supplement. Perhaps one of the most competitively relevant options for their faction, though, is the loss of the Admech Expiry veteran cohort. As if this went away and Games Workshop's changes in January didn't significantly help out the Admech, you'd basically just be kicking a bad army while it's down. In those MetaWatch things, Games Workshop have repeatedly implied that they are going to be buffing the factions that are struggling at the moment, and Admech is one of them. I expect a whole bunch of points cuts, and maybe a few changes to help out with their bad secondaries too. Losing this Skitarii veteran cohort, though, as it's due to expire in January, would not be a good thing for them, though. That's arguably their single best build right now. You pay a bit more points for the foot troops for some better invul saves and more attacks. You can't take Cult Mechanicus stuff, but it does give you some very powerful support options, including some pretty great stratagems, plus a warlord trait that allows you to manipulate the doctriners a bit more carefully, and say give Ruststalkers a speed or melee buff while the rest of the army shoots. Losing it will be a bit rubbish for them, though hopefully Games Workshop will give them a decent power lift overall. They're certainly in their crosshairs. Otherwise, the Mechanicus Defense cohort is maybe a little bit of an overly restrictive one just for Court Mechanicus. I feel like the buffs that one gave you just didn't really outweigh the negatives already in the first place, though it does make your units a bit tougher in your own drop zone. And then there's the Metallica supplement. That one has a bunch of interesting stratagems to turn off rerolls and some quite nice radiation debuffs up close for your Warlord. Again, I feel a bit similar to that one with the Blood Axe one. Having a bunch of extra in-depth options is quite cool for them. They maybe don't have quite as much raw power as, say, Mars or Lucius or things, so having a bunch of extra support does make them a bit more interesting. For the Death Guard, the formation that they'd lose would be the Terminus S Strike Force Army of Renown. This would be the one for the Harbingers, and it's mainly focused around Poxwalker hordes and infantry. It lets you deep strike infantry, which certainly isn't bad for the new and souped up Plague Marines, but the main reason that you want to take it is that if you just want to field a massive Poxwalker horde, there's some really good stratagem support for those, like making them faster, and doing some brutal regeneration by having an injured squad turn up again on the side of the board at full strength. Again, seems to be quite nicely balanced as an army of renown, usable in that people do take it to tournaments, but for the most part, people generally tend to play different plague companies, say things like Mortarians, Anvil, the Ferrymen, or the Inexorable. So I feel like losing this one would be just a bit of a loss for people who just enjoy playing zombie hordes. Next up, and perhaps the most problematic out of the losses, will be the Inquisition, and the Rogue Trader rules look like they'll be going away as well. Both of these sections of Imperial Agents had their rules in Warzone Octarius and Warzone Octarius 2, though it appears that the Assassin ones are still good till June. I feel like the Inquisition, perhaps out of any of these, are the ones that Games Workshop absolutely has to do something about. They're basically their own mini sub-faction in and of themselves. They've got lots of current models in 40k, and there's absolutely no way that they let them be completely unplayable in-game. The current rules for them are out of print in Warzone Octarius, so I guess they really have two options here. Either reissue that valid supplement list and say that they are still usable, or maybe reprint the rules in some fashion, either as a digital download or in a white dwarf. I wouldn't really expect them to change the rules on them too much. I feel like Inquisition are one of the ones where they usually just only give them minimal changes. Currently they're in 40k, I think they're probably where Games Workshop want them. Allied ones do show up occasionally in competitive lists, but it's not to the point where literally everyone wants to bring an Inquisitor because they're that good. I feel like if they did redesign the rules, probably something that they could actually make a bit nicer would be making the actual Inquisition detachment a bit less punishing, allow them to take a few Acolytes and Joe Cairo or something without it breaking your whole army rules. Otherwise, for the Rogue Traders, they had their rule section in Warzone Octarius 2, and I feel like for that rule section they might just let them slide into obscurity. They have redone the Rogue Trader rules as a download kind of recently, but rather than aimed at the models from Blackstone Fortress, they redid them for the kill team version of them that fights off against the Galapox Infectors, so the datasheets were perhaps a little bit more slimmed down, and you don't have the options for the different choices on the actual Rogue Trader anymore. I'd guess for that reason they probably wouldn't update those, and it might mean that there's no longer any actual rule support for the alternative versions from Blackstone Fortress. Otherwise, there's a fair bit more on the list. There's the Deathwatch Kill Team Strike Force. That's the Army of Renown that's 100% focused on infantry kill teams for some more powerful rules like the auto-wounding stratagem, plus being able to borrow other chapters' tactics. Again, was quite a handy power boost to a pretty niche faction, and losing it will be another nerf to one of the weakest armies in the game. The Cult of Strife supplement for Drukhari is also pretty good. That one is relevant to quite a lot of competitive lists. It allows you to build another version of a different fighty succubus. The Razor Flails plus Dark Locust Toxin plus Competitive Edge combo really is quite a good blender. Plus it does allow you some pretty nice support stratagems, such as allowing you to ignore Overwatch and allowing you to reroll the wound roll, which is quite good when you're punching up against harder targets. Another one that could potentially affect a few armies is the generic fortification rules. They're on this list as well. These were the ones that were reprinted in Warzone Octarius, and the list was cut down to just 5 core fortifications when you previously had quite a few. The Sky Shield Landing Pad, the Aegis Defense Line, the Imperial Bastion, the Void Shield Generator, and the Fortress of Redemption. I feel like it might finally be curtains for these rules after they've endured for many editions so far. Games Workshop doesn't currently sell any of these kits anymore, they all seem to have gone out of print. Though terrain rules with 40k can vary a bit, often things coming and going, so it's not impossible that some of them could return in the future. The Aegis line is certainly getting a new model, as we saw for the Imperial Guard earlier in the week, but it seems that that's going to be locked to the Astra Militarum unless they allow it as a generic choice once more. And certainly the rules wouldn't quite fit in with the old one, as the old one came with a quad gun and this one doesn't. With the Games Workshop no models, no rules thing, it does look like bastions and things might no longer be part of the game. Not that in general they tended to be used in any sort of great amount of play in armies. I feel that in general both players and Games Workshop probably want to try and keep the focus on players' armies rather than having a whole load of gun troops clustered up in a bastion or something. They certainly have got competitive at various times in 40k's past, but in general I can't say that they're usually a popular thing to see on the other side of the table, a whole load of tough gun troops behind a fortification that you might really struggle to kill, rather than an army that moves around a bit more and is a bit more engaging. Lastly, the House Raven supplement for Imperial Knights is also on the list. To my understanding, I think that this one's still match play legal. This one is the only one that I think has had a new codex since that list came out, and it said that it was legal unless superseded by a codex. I think that it would still count as being legal technically, as the House Raven rules, while they have been rewritten, none of it actually contradicts directly with any of the supplemental rules, but please correct me if I'm wrong on that. In any case, some of it was more useful than others, maybe particularly the nice movement stratagem that allowed you to go very fast down the side of the board. That was quite good. So overall, unless Games Workshop does decide to reissue the list and extend the warranty of a bunch of these, it looks like a ton of armies are going to be losing some content. Otherwise, to round out the list, there's a few other things there that are valid till June. Things like the Vanguard Spearhead for the Space Marines, Bloody Rose for the Sisters, and I believe the previous Assassins rules as well. The White Dwarf supplements seem to have no expiration date, things like various different chapters like the Emperor's Spears, Exorcist, Tomekeepers, and Craftworld Altansar. Presumably that would include the Necron ones that have come out recently as well. I do think that with a whole bunch of things expiring in June 2023, I think there is at least a reasonable chance that that could be around about when 10th edition starts. If they're going to be trying to fit it in with their 40k seasons type model, then having it at the end of one kind of makes sense. Maybe there might be a bit of a lag time as well, maybe sometime June to August. I guess if they pull a full game reset at that point, then this list is super redundant, as everything on this will basically get rescinded. But still, I think it would be a bit of a shame for a bunch of factions to lose some cool rules for the last half a year or so of 9th edition. In any case, let me know what you think. Will Games Workshop just reissue this supplement and take some things off and leave some things on? And if they don't, then how do you think that they might address Inquisition? Look forward to hearing all your thoughts as always. Please let me know down in the comments below. If you've enjoyed the video, then feel free to subscribe to Auspex Tactics, or certainly keep up with the regular 40k videos. I do tend to post new things just about every day, including news of Games Workshop's rules and releases. Finally, if you have been enjoying all the videos on the channel, I would just like to mention that Auspex Tactics does have a Patreon page as well, and you can find that links down in the video description. The channel's Patreon is what allows me to keep on making videos like this quite so regularly, so if you are enjoying a lot, any support is enormously appreciated. Channel patrons do get a fair few advantages, seeing certain videos early, regular votes to see what sort of things happen next on the channel, and automatic entry into the regular prize giveaways with the chance to win some big model kits each month. If any of that sounds good to you, or you'd just like to help support, the link is down in the video description. In any case, a massive thank you for listening, and I'll hope to see you guys next time.